It's like going back to school every year, but eventually the honeymoon period, I guess, I call it September, eventually wears off and then the real work begins. That's just as true for schools as it is for the NHL, I suppose. There's all kinds of battles at Oilers camp. And one of them is the battle to see who's going to be sticking around. I'm thinking the bottom six, but particularly the fourth line, where there's a number of players in camp. Some of them new, some of them old faces. Brendan Perlini signed a contract in the offseason, winger, NHL experience, two-way contract with the Oilers. And he's had a great preseason. He's been scoring at a great pace. And Colton Sevier was brought in on a professional tryout contract. He too is a winger. And then we also have Tyler Benson, draft pick of the Oilers from 5 years ago. And he's on the radar as well. Not everybody's going to stay on the Oilers. Some are going to get sent down. And, there's only a little bit of preseason left. What do these players have to do to stand out? Clearly, Perlini is standing out with his scoring prowess at the very least. But what about a player like Tyler Benson?
Well, Tyler Benson and Perlini are sort of the same player, although certainly Perlini's had, as an NHL resume when he played in Arizona in terms of scoring goals. And Tyler Benson hasn't had that. He's barely, he's played fewer than 10 NHL games. But they're offensive players that are trying to make a team on the fourth line and more as an extra forward, a 13th or 14th forwards. And those sort of players are usually either very aggressive or penalty killers sort of players, not offensive players having to play in the fourth line. But in Perlini's case, once you've scored 5 goals in the preseason, it's tough to keep him off the 23-man roster. Now, whether that carries over to regular season is another story, because we all know Ty Rattie did that a few times for the Oilers, and he was often playing with, I wouldn't say often, but he was playing with McDavid sometimes in the preseason and didn't, once the regular season started, he just couldn't carry it over. And Rattie wound up back in Europe, and then he's playing in Sweden now. So last time I looked, he had 5 goals in 5 games for Timrå in the Swedish Hockey League, so he could still score. But he just couldn't do it, regularly at the NHL level, and he's now in Europe. And in Tyler Benson's case, I think he's miscast where he is now. He's desperate to make the NHL, 5 years. And the team is desperate to actually have him on the roster too, because when you invest 5 years in a player, drafted as high as he is, you put a lot of effort into developing him and stuff. You would love to have him on your team. He's also cheap. He's making the same $750,000 at the NHL level, 2-way contract. So, he fits, fiscally. But whether his game fits is another story. I think it's the old, square peg in the round hole here. He wants to play in the NHL, and he's doing his best to learn how to kill penalties and and play hard and play with energy and stuff. But he's an offensive player. But unless he's playing in the top 3 lines in the NHL, I think he's miscast. And I think if it comes down to where the Oilers look at their roster and they would rather have, at the present time, I would rather have Devon Shore playing center with Perlini on one wing and Kyle Turris on another, and then a couple of extra forwards. Ryan McLeod would probably be an extra forward, and maybe Sevier, and not Tyler Benson. He goes on waivers. I just don't see a team not taking an offensive player and giving them a shot. I mean, there's quite a few teams. The 2 teams that come to mind quickly are Detroit and Arizona, with not much in terms of offensive, pop on their rosters. And I would think one of those teams would, at 750, would give them a shot and say, you were an offensive player in minors, and we think that's what you are in our team. And that's not what I see from Tyler Benson on the Oilers. So as much as I love to see him on the team and he's doing everything he can, is he a 4th-line National Hockey League player? He'd love to be, but I just don't. With his skill set, I just don't see it.
Heading into this season, the knock on Tyler Benson are one of them, but the primary one would have been his speed. Being able to keep up. If he was to play, say, in the top 6, top 9, because he has demonstrated his offensive abilities down in the AHL. But in order to play those kinds of minutes and play in those roles, he needed to bring that. Now, I do recall that an observation, he had looked even a step quicker in camp.
He has worked on his skating, and it's better. He gets on. They always say in hockey, it's the first step. If you separate yourself from a checker and get to the pucks quicker in the corners and stuff. And I think he's worked on that. I don't think his problem is his skating now. I think his skating's good enough to play in the NHL. His board work is very good. He can dig pucks out. He's got lots of skills. But is he going to be on the first penalty killing unit? No. Even with Josh Archibald out, he's not going to be in the first, or the second penalty killing unit. So if they dress him in a game, how much penalty killing work is he going to get? Is he going to be in the power play? No, he's not going to be in the power play. So those sort of players play in the bottom, the fourth line, and hardly play. They play 6-7 minutes a game for an offensive player, and that's difficult to show what you can do. So it's a thorny situation. I think the Oilers, if the Oilers didn't have so much skill already in their their top six, and he's a skilled player, and Perlini's a skilled player, they might look at him a little differently. But they got lots of skill, and they're looking more for, I think, more penalty killer types, defensive types. I think they could use some more aggressiveness on their bottom line and extra forwards. Usually, your bottom line's got somebody who's kind of nasty, or even in Josh Archibald's case, he was a good hitter. He liked to hit people for a small man, and was a good skater and killed penalties, and that was a different dimension. I think the fourth line and their extra forwards this year, there's not much in terms of aggressiveness there, and it's just kind of a hodgepodge of extra guys, other than Shore, who's clearly a fourth line NHL player who can play center of the wing, and they see him right now anyway as a center.
If the Oilers weren't in go for it now mode, like by bringing in the likes of the Zach Hymans and trading for Duncan Keith and trying to assemble a team that could make a deeper run in the playoffs, would we expect to keep Tyler Benson here in the system? That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yes, I think they're looking at it a little differently now with the win now sort of situation. It's the same thing with McLeod, probably Ryan McLeod. He played 10 games at the end of last season, and he can skate, and he played all the playoff games, so he played 14 games. And they like his skating, and they like the fact that he can kill some penalties, and he's pretty good on face-offs. But he doesn't produce anything. He hasn't, at this point in his career in the NHL, 14 games, 1 assist. I think that's what he's got. So they're looking for a little more offense with him. And they're willing, I think, to maybe carry him because he's a center. And if you're going to carry an extra forward, a center is, more applicable than carrying a winger like Tyler Benson. So, but you're right. They're in a win now mode. Do they want to have some younger players on the roster just sitting there and not playing? Probably not. So, would I be surprised if Benson doesn't make the roster and is on waivers and goes through and nobody takes him? Yes, I would. I know there's lots of players, but I think he's proven that he's a point-a-game player in the American League, and I think somebody would give him a shot. So, it's a difficult situation for the Oilers. You'd like to think that they could make some sort of trade for guys like Tyler Benson if he can't play in your team and get like a third-round draft choice or something, or a fourth-round draft choice or something, rather than just have him put him on the waiver wire. In McLeod's case, I believe they can send him to the minors. He doesn't have to clear waivers. So, but in Benson's case, he has to go on waivers.
Yeah, Benson's not on his entry-level contract anymore.
Here we're talking about the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th forwards. Those are the forwards that are not going to win the Edmonton Oilers the games. It's the Oilers have, I think, every prognosticator in the league now, and then when they break down the Oilers, say the same thing. They have the best two lines in the NHL right now. The best two lines. because they can play Draisaitl in the second line. So, and then they have, Fogle and Hyman and Fogle and Ryan and Cassian on the third line. So there's not much room for the other guys. That's that's a good thing if you're the coach, and it's a good thing if you're the fan. But if you're not good enough to play in the top 9 with the Oilers, it's difficult as a forward to get much ice time.